Today is August 16th, 2022. My name is Gabrielle Wells. I am in Williamsburg, Virginia at the College of William and Mary. Joining me today for an oral history interview is
Christopher C.J. Reiz, United States Air Force.
This interview is a part of the Crossing the Military-Civilian Divide, Oral Histories with Marginalized Veterans of Virginia project. Before we begin, do I have your permission to record this interview?
Yes, you do.
And do you have access to counseling services?
I do.
Okay, so let's begin with when and where you were born.
Fort Worth, 1972, March 8th.
And where did you grow up?
I was a military brat, so I grew up all over the place. Never really stayed anywhere for longer than 3-5 years.
Were your parents in the military?
My dad was in the military, my stepfather was in the military, my grandparents were all in the military.
What race or ethnicity do you identify as?
White.
And so, what were some of the things you liked to do for fun growing up?
Oh, we were all about sports. You know, back then there was no digital devices. I mean, we maybe had a Nintendo or a Commodore, but mostly sports. Any sports, every sport, whatever season it was, we were out there playing sports.
Tell me a little bit about your family. Did you have any siblings or?
I have one sister. She's about 5 years younger than me. She lived with her mom when my parents divorced, and I lived with my dad. So I didn't really see her much.
So you didn't really have a close relationship with her?
No, not really.
Where did you go to high school?
Went to high school in Wild Lake High School in Columbia, Maryland.
Were you there for all 4 years?
I was.
Play any sports? Or?
I played golf and baseball.
Did you? Were you part of ROTC in high school?
Not in high school, I wasn't.
Did you go to college?
Yes.
Were you involved in ROTC?
I was ROTC at Det 775 in Columbia, South Carolina.
Tell me a little bit about your experience at ROTC.
I mean, it was great. It was a camaraderie. We all loved each other and knew each other. I'm still friends with several of them. You know, we lost our touch for a while, but even in some of the same career fields, we don't see each other out in the field much. And so it was good to back up with a lot of them.
So was the ROTC for the Air Force specifically?
Yes, it was.
Talk about your path to the military. Did you, as soon as you got out of college, did you go into?
Yeah, it was about a month after. I went to my tech school I was in San Angelo, Texas, and I was on casual status, meaning they didn't have a class open for me. But so I went and worked for the American First Aid first, and they were doing some FEMA projects after some tornadoes, and then I started my class in, I believe it was October of '95.
Did you always know you wanted to be in the military?
I didn't always know that. I kind of figured that out in college when I realized that I really didn't have a path to any success. I needed to get on a project for myself to make me successful. And my dad being in the Air Force, it kind of led to looking into that. And I went and interviewed, and they were like, "Yeah, we'd be happy to have you." And that's where it started. So.
Did your dad push you towards the Air Force?
No, not at all. I mean, he always, said it was available to me, but my stepfather being in the Navy actually told me if I went in the Navy, he would disown me. But, as a joke, just because of all the deployments he was always on, 6 months to a year out to sea. And then, my father deployed a couple times, but it was still, a good organization for him to be a part of. And he was in the Navy, and then he went in the Air Force, so I just kind of followed suit.
So did you have any specific reasons for the Air Force, or just?
No, not really. I had some friends that were Air Force ROTC. I didn't know anybody in any of the other ROTC. They had a Marine Corps detachment, and they had was part of the Navy detachment, and they had an Army detachment there. But I just I fell right in with the Air Force folks.
What was it like going through basic training?
So from college, from ROTC, we go through a different kind of course. When you go through regular basic training, you get marched around everywhere and you're doing all the PT and everything else. But in the college basic training, you're marching yourselves around. They're trying to teach you to stay organized, to be standardized, and to be on the straight path, and actually be a part of the leadership development, not just marching around and taking orders, but actually we had our own wing and everything. So it was interesting. It was obviously a culture shock in the first week, because we did have MTIs that were there that were putting us through basic training drills and stuff. But then we had training officers for the rest of the time we were there. The MTIs would come every once in a while, but we had the training officers right on top of us the whole time. So it was really just trying to teach us to be leaders as opposed to just Air Force members.
So did you have basic training going into the Air Force, or was it just the ROTC?
Just the ROTC piece. Yeah.
Did you have any advanced training past that, or?
So yeah, after that, when I went to my tech school in San Angelo, I spent a year there, but it was about 9 months of training for my position in the Air Force.
What is that position?
I was an intelligence officer.
And that advanced training, was that the only training you had to do for that job, or did you have additional schools you had to go?
That was it for the specific job to show up at my first duty station. But throughout my career, there was training all the way through that was available to me, and I went to quite a bit of training whenever I wasn't deployed or I wasn't in the middle of a project. I would try and take advantage of the training classes that were open up.
Was there anything particular that helps you through your training, or any struggles you had?
No, not really. I just I arrived at training, and usually you have a day or two of settling in, and then at the back end, I would give myself an extra day to get home, within the parameters of the military travel system, and I just just made sure that I paid attention, and I nugged it through, and made sure if there was tests involved, I was studying quite a bit.
Were you able to stay in contact with your friends and family during training, or?
Absolutely. Obviously not during the ROTC basic training. That we were locked down for the 6 weeks they were there, but for all the other training, at night you were pretty much on your own for the night, and we could contact our family via phone back then. There wasn't a whole lot of email going on.
So what came next after your tech school, your advanced training?
So I went to Abilene, Texas, where I started off as a B1 intelligence officer. My first week there, it was when Khobar Towers was hit, and when it happened, I was the only one in the building with another airman. So they called over and they were saying we need a briefing for the wing commander. So that was kind of kicked off my career, was right in the first week. But then after about a year, I went over to the C-130s, and I was their flight officer for Intel for 2 years, and we deployed. It was pretty constant, mostly for the Balkans, and that was enjoyable. That was probably some of my favorite time was with the C-130 crews, deploying and flying all the time.
Did you have a typical day, or is every day kind of different? Every
day is dynamic. As you get up into some of even the higher levels of the leadership, your day can kind of get into a normal grind. But especially starting off, something new is every day. You're learning every day. Every project you're on, you're learning new things, and throughout the entire career, it was you're learning something every day. But definitely for the first 10 to 12 years, it was. You never knew what was going to hit you. It was always something new coming on.
Your first day in intelligence, what year was that?
So I graduated from the intelligence school in 1996, and I went straight to Abilene. So that would have been the summer of '96.
So you were in the Air Force for a few years before 9/11 happened. What do you remember about 9/11?
So I was actually at a training course in D.C. At an off-site location. The course was leadership in terrorism and state-sponsored regimes, and so I was actually learning about what was going on at the time. We were learning about who the leaders were in each of the organizations. We actually had the plane that hit the Pentagon flew right over our building. We were starting to shuttle back outside to try and figure out what was going on and what we were going to do, and that's when we saw it. I mean, it was low level, not like anything had ever been low level there before. So we kind of figured that was the one that went that way. But and the track afterwards, obviously, the track, the visuals on the imagery and stuff, it showed right over the building we were flying. So they were flying, and so it was kind of crazy. I was in the middle of it. We were on lockdown almost immediately. They sent us back to our hotels and said, stay put, contact your commands. I was, at the time, I was stationed with Special Operations Command in Tampa, Florida, which was heavily involved. And when I called back, they were like, we need you to come home right away. And I'm like, I don't know how you're going to get me down there because all the aircrafts are, closed down, and it'll take me a couple of days to get down there. I could have made it within 24 hours, but the roads were crazy, and they called back and said, no, you stay right where you're at until they open up the airports. So I was there for a couple of days, just sitting there watching. I wanted to go out and get away and help what was going on, but they wanted us right there. I stayed in the hotel the whole time.
So did you ever resume that training course that you were in?
No, actually I didn't. I ended up training in a different level of the same information at different organizations, but yeah, that one was done. It was day one, and we were out the door, within the first probably hour of the class starting.
So you had a few years before 9/11 happened that you were in the Air Force. Were there any remarkable differences between how the Air Force operated before and after 9/11?
Absolutely. We even just the deployments themselves, we were doing a lot of 45 and 90-day deployments as a two-squadron system. We would fly over for 45 days, and then the next squadron would come over for the next 45. The intel folks usually stayed, for the full 90. There was a couple times where I would go, either the 45 and come home and go straight back out onto the next location, or I do the 90, come home, and then go straight back out. So I did. I went out on deployment with them, although much shorter before 9/11. I did deployment 6 times with the C-130s, and then 2 times after 9/11, and those were, that's when everything started getting, the longer deployments. Air Force was doing, 6 months to a year, depending on location. And, the Army was doing, full-on year deployments and stuff. Secretary of the Air Force basically said, we're all in. And the Air Force started doing a lot of the jobs that were gapped by the Army. So we had, several people going to locations that were non-Air Force specific.
So was the deployment length the biggest difference you noticed, or were there anything else?
The deployment length, but the organizations I were in, we enjoyed ourselves when we weren't conducting mission, but when we were on mission, it was almost the same level of attention and attention to detail and aggressiveness to conduct the mission and do it correctly and do it by the book. And so that really didn't change much. There was a little bit of a heightened increase in that, just because of how important it really was. And we were supporting the Balkans before 9/11, or supporting the efforts by the United Nations in the Balkans before 9/11, and then after 9/11, everything was moving over to Afghanistan and then Iraq. So it was a lot more aggressive for us. We definitely were on heightened awareness just because of the global war on terrorism, a little bit more so than we were prior to 9/11. But for me, nothing really changed. I mean, it was the same level of effort, input, and output before and then after 9/11.
So did the topic of the intelligence switch to Afghanistan?
For sure, the main piece of that went to support the Afghanistan mission. My next 2 deployments were in support of Afghanistan, and then my second one of those 2 was Afghanistan, and then as mostly Iraq. But yeah, it was definitely a different a different culture and a different AOR, or area of responsibility. So it was hard to pick all that back up because we weren't really focused on that, even though we should have been for years. But there were folks in the Department of Defense and the national agencies that were focusing on that at the time before 9/11, and then when 9/11 hit, everybody was scrambling to get to the other side.
When you were deployed to those locations, were you located in an Air Force base somewhere there? Or?
So because I was intelligence for the support organizations that were flying in, I was in Kyrgyzstan for one deployment, and for the other I was round robin between Kuwait, Iraq, Germany. We were based out of Germany, and Rota, Spain, Morone, And basically I had 7 locations that were a part of my mission, so I was flying from all of those locations on a regular basis, make sure that the intelligence crews were doing their job and doing it well, and then make sure the aircraft, because we were supporting all aircraft operations, so for cargo airlift in and out, which was the heavy lifting, made sure that the air crews and their commanders were happy with the intelligence support they were getting. So yeah.
What were some of like the basic tasks you had to do when you were actually deployed? Were they always different depending on location?
It was different depending on location, and quite frankly, my position, my rank in what I was doing when I was younger. It was all mission briefs, making sure the crews knew where all the threats were, helping the crews develop flight plans that would get around the major threats, getting them in and out of the air bases. As I got up a little bit farther, it started to become more of like the wing commander and the leadership briefs, the current intelligence briefs. And then there was, I had, when I was deployed, I also had the aircrew piece to it too. So it was kind of a double mission, making sure that my leadership, where I was stationed at the time, was kept in the knowledge and know of what was going on downrange, so they could effectively support the in and out. And then obviously the air crews that were flying in and out of range, the combat zones, they were always briefed and kept up to the knowledge of knowing where the threats were, and how high to fly or how low to fly and those kind of things.
Did you ever directly experience combat being in intelligence, or?
So I didn't, but I did. I flew over several locations, and then obviously I flew into Iraq and landed several times. Luckily, the times that I was in Iraq, we didn't have any major issues. The times we flew over Afghanistan, I was supporting, I'd fly with the KC-135, which is a refueler. So, we would always have the radios on to listen to the troops in contact down on the ground. And as soon as we would hear troops in contact and what they were going through, we kind of knew that the fighter aircraft and the bomber aircraft were going to come up and get refueled and go back down and support. So we were basically loitering in those missions. For the Balkans, when we flew out of one of the locations, we were spotlighted and we were fired on by a ground-based gun threat, and none of us were hit. Nothing happened, but we were definitely doing a lot of maneuvers to get out of that position and firing off flares and all kinds of stuff to try and mask our location at the time. Once we were out of the range, we weren't firing the flares. We were trying to get away in the dark. But yeah, it was pretty hairy there. But I mean, obviously not troops in contact downrange. Those heroes were by far way more levels of combat than I can only imagine what they went through. So we always had a high respect for the folks that were on the ground that were doing the combat. And intelligence was involved. We had airmen that were constantly involved with the Army, doing EOD, ordnance disposal missions, doing convoy missions and stuff like that. So they were definitely not doing their normal Air Force mission. But we were all involved. We were all in.
What was the most difficult part about being deployed?
Clearly not being home with the family is always the number one. Not having your own pillow and your own TV and your own stereo system and really your own space to have your me time as well. We didn't have our own computers, and we weren't doing a whole lot with the family back home. We didn't have Skype and Zoom. We just started getting a few of the capabilities towards the end of my career, end of my deployments. We started getting a little bit of the video capability, but even that was, a difficulty. So mostly it was over the phone, and a lot of times it was I don't know if it's the Department of Defense or the Department of State or whoever controls the phone lines, but you only get so many minutes, each night to call. Sometimes it's each week, depending on the location. So you get like 10 or 15 minutes to do a morale call. So it's, you get on the phone, it's miss you, love you, what's going on, and it's the highlights, and then, your call's over. So, that's probably the biggest difficulty, was just missing home.
So So it was a pretty irregular contact schedule you had with your.
Oh, absolutely. There'd be weeks where my wife wouldn't hear from me, wouldn't be able to talk to her at all. I was in some locations that just didn't provide the access to a phone system that I could call home, or just didn't provide the environment for me to be able to call home. So yeah, she missed weeks without me being able to call.
Were you guys ever able to give like a warning to your family saying, "Hey, we're gonna be out of contact for"?
So for the most part, my wife knew, because some of the missions, especially that I went out on, she knew that she wouldn't be able to hear from me for a while. But usually it would be while we're having the normal morale call. I'd say, "Hey, I'll probably be available, in 2 weeks or whatever, or I'll be able to call you in a couple days." So she, luckily, she was able to spend all her time with our children growing up. So it was, definitely easier to reach her at home, not knowing that she didn't have a work schedule or couldn't get contact while she was working. So it was a lot easier to get a hold of her whenever I needed to. But yeah, there were some sporadic times there.
Did you have a chance for downtime at all during deployment?
Yeah, there was definitely some downtime available, especially during the Balkan support. We would work constantly. You work in 12 to 16-hour days, and then there's sometimes you just wouldn't even go to sleep. You just enjoy the folks that you're around, and there was locations to have a meal and the like. In Kyrgyzstan, we didn't have that same luxury, but there was a chance to get off base very infrequently, do some humanitarian efforts in the area, as well as some other enjoyments. We got to play volleyball with the Kyrgyzstan military. We went and actually shot weapons with them on a range, able to shoot some of the Russian weapons that they had. So it was definitely some downtime or some time away from the mission, but for the most part, when you're there, it's all mission.
Did that kind of stuff happen prior to 9/11, or did it ever happen after?
No, actually, it was after as well, especially the Kyrgyzstan piece, which was 2006, I believe, and we were able to meet with the Kyrgyzstan military and invite them to our base, and then we were able to go out to their base and just visit and learn their mission, and just kind of learn their culture and the people. They were wonderful people. Everywhere we went, for the most part, were just wonderful. Wonderful people, great culture, great learning experience. I don't have any connected friends from those missions, or meeting people outside of the United States Air Force, but I definitely developed some great relationships while we were there, and it helped in our work environment too. It was easier to conduct our mission, having good relationships with the host nation.
What was your job like when you weren't on deployment? Was it kind of the same?
Most of it just depended on where we were located. I mean, there's a couple of jobs it was mostly trying to spin up for an exercise or an inspection that was coming up, and then also getting the air crews off the base and overseas. So for the post 9/11, it was just particularly it was trying to move aircraft overseas to where I was actually doing the job when I was deployed. So it made it easier to do the transition for the deployment because I knew the crews and the air crews that were coming in. I knew a lot of the intelligence officers and enlisted that were working those missions as well. So that made it a little bit easier, but yeah, that's about it on that.
Did you have any favorite memories about your time in the Air Force?
Oh, there's too many to list, really. And most of it was just the interaction and the culture of the military at the time. Just the friends that we made. We are always looking out for each other, making sure that our wingman was safe and that they were keeping us safe. Really, that's kind of what drove, especially on deployments, that's kind of what drove us to just grind them out and get home safely. Just making sure that everybody was taken care of, whether they were on mission or not.
Are you still in contact with some of those friends you've made?
Oh, absolutely. I've been in contact with some. My best friend actually lives in, about 30 minutes from here. from the military. We met in tech school, so that was 27 years ago, and we've been good friends since. We visit with the family, every once in a while, and we kept in touch over all our deployments and all of our, we even actually went to some courses together, and even though we were stationed thousands of miles away from each other, we were still able to keep in touch. So absolutely. There's several actually that I've gotten back in touch with from my C-130 days, and that community hasn't really changed at all. Those characters are still the same characters they were back then. It's refreshing to meet up with them, especially mostly on social media. But I have met with several of them outside of social media as well.
Were you ever wounded during your service in the Air Force?
I wasn't combat wounded, no. I do have several disabilities. Still unknown where they were received, but nothing. I'm no Purple Heart winner for sure. Like I said, those heroes were doing work that I would definitely have picked up for them if I was in that position. But they were doing things that they deserved the award. They deserved the recognition, and I wasn't in that combat environment.
When did you start developing these health issues that eventually led to you retiring?
So some of them started, like my lower back started in like 2000 and I want to say that was about 2004. So I really hadn't been in but maybe 9 years, and a lot of that was the flying, the missions that I had flown in, and I had a unique position where a lot of times I was standing up. Whether I was recording or I was providing information to the air crew on the cockpit, but at low levels it was really bumpy, and definitely just kind of kept pushing my back down and my spine, and so that started to develop in about 2004, and then the big one was just this headache I've had since 2016, or sorry, 2014. October of 2014, I just got a headache. I thought it was going to, based on my sickness, I was kind of had a cold, and it hasn't stopped since. It's been every day, all day for, 7, 8 years now. So
there's nothing like major that happened?
Not that we can tell. I mean, the MRIs are clear, the CT scans are clear. It's not sinus related. It's there's just nobody that's been able to figure it out. No neurologist, no neurosurgeon. Nobody's been able to define exactly what it is. They don't even call it. It's because it's a chronic situation, and it's every day, and it's not like clusters or anything. It's not even migraine related. So the migraine medications that they tried me on for the last 7 or 8 years have been ineffective. So we're trying all kinds of different things now.
Did you retire voluntarily, or did the military kind of push you to?
So it was a little bit of both. I was evaluated, medically evaluated, and received I was medically evaluated for my back, and my leadership said, you're still doing your mission. Do you want to stay in? I said, absolutely. So they wrote a letter, and I was able to stay in for that part. I got to about the 20-year mark with the headaches, and it was about 6 years, I guess. No, I'm sorry. It was 3 years with the headaches that just started realizing, I wasn't going to be able to carry out the mission. I couldn't perform a full duty day with the Air Force. I wasn't giving the Air Force my 100%. So I knew at that time that the medical evaluation board was the way to go. I mean, I met my 20-year retirement requirement anyway, so I was medically boarded, but it was still a retirement.
Do you have access to disability and VA benefits?
I do. I don't use the VA because I'm still with TRICARE for my insurance company, and they've been so far wonderful. They've been taking care of me. I haven't needed to go to the VA. I know that some of the VA locations that we have locally are still trying to recover from the smear that they had over the previous years. So, and there's so many. I've talked about the hero. There's so many folks that need that more than I do. Obviously I'm suffering, but They've got wounds that can never be repaired, and so they should have that time with the VA. But if I do ever need to have the VA involved, then yeah, I have free access to be able to do that.
So you have access to those benefits even though they're not necessarily service related?
Yes, because everything that happened while I was in the military is service related, not combat related. But because especially since you can't really figure out what caused certain things, there's still a disability that's attached to it while you're on active duty. Active duty, you're 24/7. So anything you do, whether it's on base, off base, extracurricular, or with the military missions or whatever it is, that's all considered active duty time, and therefore your disability is on duty.
Since you had these health issues that eventually led to you retiring from the Air Force, did you have any sort of career plans after that, or were you just focused on trying to get better?
No, I mean, I wanted to stay in the Air Force. My dad spent 34 years in the Air Force. My stepfather spent a long career in the Navy. My intent was to go a lot longer, but the culture had changed significantly, and it wasn't difficult to acclimate, but it was definitely not going down the path that I wanted to go. So my intent was to get out and work into either a contract or a GS position. I was actually offered 6 figures when I got out to work, but I couldn't perform a full day. So I became a real estate agent because I could define my own hours, and my clients up front they've all been military so far, even though I can provide services to non-military folks looking for housing. But so far it's all been referrals from friends and family, and from past clients that have referred me to new clients. So I can only have to do a couple of transactions a year to make it worth my while as far as the fees are concerned, and then to kind of get me back up to the level of income I was making before I retired.
Was there a huge time gap between when you left the Air Force to when you started becoming a real estate agent?
It was almost a year before I started. I mean, I'd say about 6 months is when I decided I was going to go get my license and hook up with a brokerage, and it was about a year before I did almost a year to the date before I did my first transaction, my first sale.
Did you have any specific interest in real estate, or did you just kind of like the asset?
No, I'd actually bought and sold houses almost my entire military career. I bought my first house in '99, and then we just bought and rented or bought and sold throughout my career. So I was heavily interested in real estate from the get-go. So, and then I just enjoyed all the times that I would look for houses. We move all the time. Every time I was looking for houses, I just enjoyed that protocol, just doing that mission of trying to find our next place to live. And I thought, there's so many pressures on airmen today to get from one base to the next. COVID's not helping. Obviously, that's still causing some consternation. Even though we're past it. But it's in processing can be daunting, especially if you have children. And trying to get them to school time and trying to get them, there's so many other things on their plate. I wanted to take some of that pressure off. Finding a house is a huge emotional pressure point, stressing, and I just wanted to be a part of a little bit of the solution, finding a good house for these great families that have been doing the country, doing hero work for the country.
Did your family have to move around a lot when you were in the Air Force?
Yes, I mean we moved every 2 to 3 years. I actually, when I was a military dependent, we were able to, my whole high school, for example, I was able to go to my entire high school. Luckily, obviously when I retired, my kids were able to enjoy, sticking around for a while. But we moved every 2 to 3 years.
And around what year did you officially retire from the Air Force?
2016.
Okay. Was there anything in particular that helped or hindered your readjustment to being a civilian?
I think it was just the major difference, when I started dealing with agencies outside of the military, there seems to be a huge disconnect, and a lot of folks are talking about it still. The culture of the work ethic. In the military, it's you give or you're given orders, and you come up with solutions to the problems, and you go about your business and get the work done and conduct the mission. But it seemed like in the civilian realm, finding folks that were very customer oriented or were in it for the mission, and not necessarily a financial issue, but from a standpoint of just accountability, there just seems to be no accountability, and that's hard to deal with from a military perspective when you're 100% accountable when you're in the military. I mean, the military is still, even though it argues it's not, it's still a one-fault military. If you do one thing that changes your career path or changes your environment and the culture of the military, you're pretty much done. You can start packing your bags. But in the civilian realm, it just seemed like that was a lot of companies doing the lowest common denominator or paying the lowest amount of money, and not hiring the quality, not hiring the work ethic. And when you're dealing with that, it's very difficult for a military retiree or separation to deal with a pace that's not on par with the fast pace that we're used to working in.
Did you pick up on any behaviors in the military that has carried over to your civilian life, like strict wake-up time or certain?
No, in my wake-up time, obviously my headache has been excruciating at times, and my sleep period is messed up. But I worked a lot of night shifts in the military too, so that kind of led to that. Plus, in college I was on night owl. I was always studying at the last minute. But yeah, I kind of got used to the night, and it made it a lot easier when I got out, because then I didn't have that specific time that I had to be at the office. So that made it easier. Luckily, the last couple of assignments, I was able to, still provide the Air Force with a full Air Force day, provide my staff with full access to me and myself back to the mission. But I was able to stagger sometimes based on who I had, working on in the office with me. They would normally take the really early mornings, and I would stay for the after duty hours, mission stuff.
So you mentioned you were married and you have children.
Mm-hmm.
How did being in the Air Force affect those kind of relationships?
Obviously in the intelligence community, we're completely silent about what we do day to day. My wife to this day still doesn't know 95% of what I did. The things that I can tell her, are very, insignificant when it comes to the actual missions that we conducted. And so, she still doesn't ask. She knows she can ask, once, and if I can talk about it, then, I will. But if I can't, I don't say anything, and she goes, okay. And so that relationship, from a standpoint of not being able to come home and unload, that definitely is a factor and affects the relationship for all military, not being able to decompress with, somebody you love or somebody who cares about you, and decompress at a level where you kind of lift some of the stress and the weight off by talking about something. We just couldn't do it. And so, yeah, that made a little bit of difficulty. Definitely saw, after I got out, the relationship just pick up speed. We were able to stay on the same path and the coordinates, and know each other's thoughts and what we were doing day to day. And I was more in the know with what was going on with the family and what the kids were doing and that kind of thing. So it definitely made the relationship much easier once I retired.
Have you been able to, with being in intelligence, I know you can't talk a lot about what you did, but for just basics experiences in the military, have you been able to open up with family or friends about some of the things?
The very basic stuff, unclassified. The news, obviously, mainstream media just has butchered the news quite a bit. The politicians out there now are definitely not recording what's really happening. And so there was a lot of things that I was privy to. I was able to see that, you're like, that's just not the right story. Especially on, the news outlets, they just, even with the current situation with the Ukraine, they're missing big pieces. And quite frankly, they may never know those pieces because it affects what happens in the combat realm. You definitely don't want to give up any information about your sources of information, or jeopardize based on information you provide. If it jeopardizes your own troops or your allied troops, then you definitely don't want to give up that information. And so, mainstream media and everybody else, they can only go off the bits and pieces that they've been given. So that makes it really difficult, especially to watch certain things happen in the United States today. Just the diversity that has disappeared briefly. We seem to, in the military, and I know that it's in the military as well, but even when I was a kid in the military base school system, we just, racism and all that kind of stuff never really impacted anything we were doing. We didn't pay attention to any of that. But now it's such a big issue that it's it's clouding some of the other things that are going on. And rightfully so, it should be addressed again, but we need to get to a part where it's just, we're all on the same sheet of music here in the United States. We can put politicians in positions that are going to, make our country better, but in the end run, that's affecting what we're doing overseas, and that becomes a very difficult challenge. I had a member of one of my Special Operations Command students. He was doing a part with an exercise where he had to be in front of the media. We had reporters there that were, bombarding them with questions and the like. And I'll never forget, he got up there and they kept asking him certain questions, and he said, I can't talk about that, can't talk about that. And he finally said, look, we're in the business of writing scripts to movies you'll never see. And that right there, that stuck with me for years. We're in the business of writing scripts to movies you'll never see. And it's completely true. There's things that will never be known outside of the communities that it's in. And there's things that'll never be known, to the public, just because of the information could damage our situation in that environment, or it could hurt, some of our teams or our allies while they're out in the mission.
So moving a little more towards some of the health issues you've had,
Mm-hmm.
how have they affected your life? I know your headaches and stuff like that affect your sleep.
Well, it affects everything. There's been times when I've been bedridden for 20 days out of 30. I've missed entire years with my kids still. I got out and we had hoped that, maybe the stress of being in the military was causing the headaches, but it wasn't. And I changed my diet and we've been through different, 1,000 different medications and different other things, and nothing seems to have worked. And, my kids are able to go to Busch Gardens and Water Country, and, my youngest is a gymnast and my oldest was an ice skater, now going to college. And so I missed so much time with them, especially in the summers when they had, either vacation time or they were able to go to some of the venues that we have here locally, and I couldn't attend. I'd have it on my calendar, and I'd get up in the morning and I would feel like there's no way, and I'd go take a shower just to make sure. Sometimes a shower would cool me off and maybe release some of the pain, but there were so many times where I'd take a shower and still come out and I'd look at my wife and I said, there's just no way. I couldn't walk, I couldn't function, there was no way I could go down the stairs, and it was very debilitating to do anything. And it's still somewhat, well, I wouldn't say somewhat, but majorly an issue. And I'm changing certain things in my diets again, and trying different things, and I kind of forcing myself to get up out of bed and spend time with my kids.
Are there any main things that you deal with that stand out more so than others, like the headaches, or do some things kind of just like not become as noticeable?
Well, it just depends. I mean, my headache when it's full blown. So this was news to me. Obviously, I've all my life I've been a talker and I can hold a conversation pretty well. But it just it got more and more, and interrupting got more and more. And a doctor recently diagnosed, or at least pointed me in the right direction of pressure of speech. I'd never heard of, and with that, knowing the information, what pressure of speech is and what it does, it hides your highest level of pain. It allows your brain to function very effectively, even though you're in excruciating pain and nobody knows. You're able to hide everything from everyone on the outside, and that's why there's been a lot of stigma with these hidden. The hidden pains, the hidden medical issues. People going, "Oh, you're working just fine. Why are you? What are you claiming? And why are you doing that?" And it's like, yeah, if you sat down and I just took my mind off of whatever I was doing, I'd be a ball of mess. And so that's been at the house at home too. It's just, I wake up, I have excruciating headache, and I can't move. And I got to force myself sometimes to get to certain meetings and doctor's appointments. I have to get up and force myself to move, to go to make those appointments. 'Cause there's a lot of times when I'm canceling appointments that morning too. I get up in the morning and I have an 8:30 or 9 o'clock appointment, and there's just no way I'm going to make it. I have to go call it in and cancel.
So there are times where you can kind of force yourself to keep moving, or is it like null things, or you just kind of change like the way you think about it?
It really is just a masking of the pain enough to function. That's extremely hard to do. I know that there's a lot of doctors and obviously a lot of studies that are on both sides of this, but your significant pain, your most dominating pain, really does hide, or for me, it hides all of my other pain. So my back right now, it only hurts when I do something, insignificant that hits it, and my back starts to become an issue. But for the most part, the head dominates all of every pain I have in my body. It's just my head. And so, doing real estate or helping folks with real estate questions and the like in my brokerage, it just takes my mind off of some of those things, and I'm able to kind of just pay attention to what is going on as opposed to paying attention to the headache. And when I can do that, when I can kind of forget about the headache for a second, then I can kind of motivate myself to get places and do certain things. But when there's, even when you've got a mission of going to one of your daughter's events, getting the pain to subside enough that you can actually motivate yourself to get up is very difficult to do.
So you mentioned some of these medical conditions came up when you were still in active duty. How did dealing with those conditions affect your work in the Air Force?
So, at the end there, I was having to make a lot of sacrifices at work. And that's why, it made the decision, the medical evaluation board, I wasn't going to fight, I was going to retire, is because I just wasn't giving my personnel my full attention. They weren't getting 100% of me. And that definitely hit me hard, knowing that, I've got that same requirement. It's just give me a full Air Force day. I was never really worried about, unless we had full mission going on and people having to take care of family things or, oil change in the cars or whatever else, as long as they gave me the full Air Force day afterwards. And by that I meant, the time and the effort and the mission still needed to get taken care of if they were allowed to go do those, if the mission wasn't like right there and current, or it wasn't like an immediate requirement for their task. I felt the same way. I was like, I couldn't even put in a full Air Force day, and it was driving me crazy. And it was leading to the stress, a lot of stress. I felt horrible for my personnel that were working for me that weren't getting 100% of what I could provide.
How long do you think you dealt with that before you decided to just completely go with the medical professional and retire? Was it a couple weeks, a couple months?
Well, no, I mean, it started, so the headache started in October of 2014. I didn't realize that it was going to be full-time until, or at least at that point, we didn't know until well into 2015. So it was like a year before we started saying, hey, we need to go see a neurologist. And, my primary care wasn't able to help the dynamic pain that it was. And the neurologist wasn't able to help, within the first couple months. So when the medical evaluation board came up, it made sense, and I supported it 100%. I just knew that unless there was some quick fix, there was just not going to be any way that I'd be able to give back to the Air Force, what I was required to do. So it made sense.
So once you visited a bunch of medical professionals and realized that this wasn't something that was easily fixed, that's when you're like, okay, maybe it's time to shift.
Absolutely. Like I said, I thought maybe just the stress of the military or just the environment that we kind of morphed into. I thought maybe that, getting out of that and going and doing just a regular intelligence job in the military would be fine, whether it was a contractor or a GS position. Something with, a little bit of stability, but was definitely high paying. In fact, I was called for one, and I said I can't do it, and I ended up calling my friend and saying, hey, you want a job? And he ended up getting the job. So it worked out for him, but it was definitely a kick in the shorts for me. It's just, hey, I can't put the effort in to do a full-time position. And this is well before COVID and everybody could work from home for sure. But I couldn't go to the office full time, and that's obviously I didn't want to join an organization knowing that I was going to not be able to put in a full day. So it came down to that decision after my retirement, and I just wasn't going to be able to accept that position or accept a similar position unless something was fixed in my head.
So as we start moving towards the end of the interview, I have a few more questions for you. How did your service and experiences affect the rest of your life?
I mean, all my life I've been pretty loyal, and I think it only made that so much stronger, both at the end of my career, and then now made me extremely loyal to the personnel that were working for me, that were working around me. I'm a big person on character, and if their character proved that, they were not a double standard person or a narcissistic person or something like that, that they were really in it to do the mission, and they were in it to save lives overseas and stuff like that, and I knew that was their character, and they were personable, that goes a long way with me. And when you find people that are actually accountable for what they do, especially in the business I'm in now as a real estate, is finding vendors and contractors to do certain things nowadays, is to find a good one is virtually impossible, because the ones that are really good, they're booked because they get latched onto, and then people don't want to give them up. And from an agent perspective, we definitely don't want to loan anybody out when they're trying to do work at your own house and you can't get work done. Because all the good ones are the ones that you really trust and are loyal to are all busy with their own schedules, booked out for months and months. So and then with my friends from my elementary school days, connecting back with them, I've just been super loyal, again, to the character. If the character is a quality character, and basically not showing their ass all the time, then my loyalty stands strong with them. The same goes with my family. I've rebuilt some relationships, and obviously with my kids and my wife, completely loyal, and do whatever I can to make sure that I'm on their side. Sometimes they do some silly things. My daughter's obviously still growing up, do some silly things that, as a loyal father, I've got to step in on the other side every once in a while. But yeah, I mean, my name is my reputation, is my legacy. It's not, I'm the last of the Reiz line in this chain, and I just want to make sure I pass on the right things to my kids and show the people around me that that I'm loyal and that I do love or care for them very well, very much. That's probably the most important thing. What have been some highlights of your life? Obviously I was connected to the military, I'm still connected to the military, but for 40, what is that? I think it's 44 years, 45 years. I was in the military of some sort, whether as a dependent growing up or as active duty member. And so a lot of my memories are exactly that. They're from the military. Just the other day we were talking in a group from RAF Chicksands, the air base that was over there in England that is no longer a United States Air Force location. But all the kids that were there in the school system and playing in the sports on the base and the like, we all remember each other. In fact, that's going back in my history. Those are the folks that I can remember just from a picture and go, oh, that's their name is such and such. I can't do that with pretty much the rest of my life. So that built the stage for everything was from there. And we talk regularly now, phone calls now as well, and kind of keep in touch with the elementary school people of all people. The ones that kind of shaped you and you shaped off of are still a big factor. But yeah, through the rest of my life, that's been the biggest thing is making sure that my persona has not changed. I'm definitely not the I used to be a major, excuse my language, but major asshole, and it took me years and years to realize how I was treating people. So I made a strong effort towards the end of my career to kind of change that part. And then, now I'm working on that and working on my speech and working on a few other things to try and better my health as well.
What lessons from your life experiences would you like to share?
The first one is, boy, I wish I could go back and meet myself at, even age 8 or 9 or 10 when I started getting influenced with a lot of things. I was a small kid, and I was a little ruffian. I tried to insert myself into just about everything. I interrupted all the time. Anytime there was my family, especially, there was a gap of air in between two people talking, the adults talking, and little 10-year-old me wants to get something out. I would wait till the air was open just for a second, and then I would be jumping in just about every time. And I did that for years, all the way through my career. Not until probably 2009 or 10 did I realize that I was doing that. I mean, that's deep into my career at that point. That I realized I was doing that, and I started recognizing it, and started letting my leadership know, and that I was that I was working on certain things, and apologize to those I had done it to, and as best I could. And so now, fast forward after the military, I'm doing the same thing now. I'm making sure that I'm working on those things and improving on myself, especially since it definitely helps with with rejuvenation. When you're working on yourself and you can accomplish certain things that you couldn't accomplish before, it makes you feel better. So it helps with my life overall.
What do you think civilians should understand about military service or how to interact with veterans?
That's a hard thing to translate. Only those that were in the military at some point, even if they only served a year or 2 years and they were, they had to get out at that point, or they have a brother in the military or some family member in the military that they're close with, they're just never going to understand. and vice versa, from the military, getting out of the military and going back into the civilian world, we've forgotten what it's like before we got in the military. And our expectations when we get out of the military are based on our progression in the military. So it's somewhat unrealistic. I mean, again, going back to we were, you gave orders, you received orders, and you did what you could to solve the problems. I would always go to my leadership, and I'd present a problem, but I would never go with just the problem. I always go with a couple of solutions and say, hey, this is what we're working on, and they can provide direction from that point. But in the civilian realm, most of the people just come with problems. They don't come with the solutions that go with it, or try and figure out the common ground. They're really just they just don't understand how focused a military brain is. I'm not saying that civilians aren't focused, because there's fantastic civilians who are absolutely focused and doing great missions, and for the United States as well. Working in positions that affect the protection of our country. They're outstanding, but even they don't quite understand the rigors and the stress of being in the military, and it makes it difficult for the two to blend. It's not impossible. It's definitely pretty easy when you get out of the military to start settling down your constant go button. But it definitely takes. It's a challenging thing for folks that get out of the military to relax to the level and be accustomed to being, unfortunately, being let down a lot of times, because it's just not the direct military approach.
Is there anything else you'd like to discuss that we haven't talked about, or that you'd like to go back to?
I will talk about some of the things that I have been doing lately. I recently got connected last summer. I got connected with an organization, CJ3, and I was able to go to they have it's 100% volunteer staff. Any money that's fundraised goes back to the veterans. So the veterans are flown to Albia, Iowa. There's a little headquarters there for the medical part of it, the medical treatment. So I was able to go up there and get assessed and go through some of their medical procedures. And there was some time there that was very beneficial in me understanding myself and some of the things that were a factor in my relationships, which helped. And then the CJ3 organization actually provided me with a service dog. So there's 3 missions that advocate for the veterans, the mental health and assessment and awareness, and physical health and assessment, and then the service dog piece. Just the fact that this organization is up on the Hill constantly with congressmen and senators, and constantly talking about the gaps in veteran care and support, and not to detract from any of the other organizations that are out there that are outstanding supporters of military veterans, but there's a lot of gaps in between it, and we just got to recognize where those gaps are. And unfortunately, CJ3 has been able to fill a lot of those gaps for service members worldwide. It's not. My name is CJ, and that's the only coincidental thing. It's I'm now trying to advocate for CJ3 and for veterans as well as a part of their program. But it's I didn't develop it. I just happened to fall into it myself. But the thing that's missing in the civilian world, whereas it's trying to adapt to a lot of these military members having disabilities that are just debilitating, or unable to function in society. CJ3 and the other organizations are out there that are trying to make that happen, improve the quality of life for these individuals, and some of that is trying to adapt them to the society, the social life that they haven't had outside of the military before, and some of it's for healing, and the service dog is for help. I fall a lot, and so the service dog was a mobility requirement for me, but just the the camaraderie you make with a service dog is amazing as well. It definitely opens up your parameters to the whole process of CJ3 and what they provide. It opens up the parameters to absolutely increase your quality of life, and that's what we're all trying to do. And so when we're dealing with the non-military individuals, a lot of them don't understand the fight that we're fighting, and they don't understand the fight we're fighting for others, for other veterans, because there's veterans out there that need this much more than I do, and there's just not enough support for it. After 9/11, you had support anywhere you went, didn't matter where it was. And I'm not talking about, discounts and those kind of things. Those are great. They make things go a lot easier, especially for individuals that may not be able to hold down a job, military veterans. But it's not that part. It's the piece where they understand how hard we're fighting to be a part of that of society. How hard they are, working to increase their quality of life, and they're just sometimes they're just not able to do it because the folks that they're dealing with, the people that they're dealing with, don't understand what they're going through themselves. So it makes it difficult, puts up a border that really shouldn't be there. And so if I had to say, one thing to folks that haven't been in the military ever in their life, or don't have somebody that they love in the military, is just understand that there's a lot of issues with these individuals coming home from war or combat, whether it be physical or mental. We definitely have to help some way, shape, or form. Otherwise, we'll never be able to we'll never be able to progress. Individuals that came home from World War II, for example, they fought through it without any of the support. And they were able to go right to work and support their families and stuff. But these new wars and the new combat and the amount of mainstream media and everything else is just making it very difficult for people to recover so quickly, and they need help. And fortunately for me, CJ3 stepped in and was able to start helping. I'm not there yet, working on it, but and they can help other people. But if from a veteran perspective, if you need help, go get the help. Don't bottle it up. There's people that are willing to provide support and help for you.
All right, that's all I had. I just want to thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you so much.